What's good, YouTube? This is ED here, and we're going to remake New Dawn by MACROSS. Now, it's a fairly simple song, but we can go through the processes of making a future funk song. So, let's begin, shall we? First things first is that we're going to drag all the files we need into the project. For the sake of organization, I'm going to give all the percussions and drums a distinct color. Afterwards, I'm going to put all of them in an individual channel except the snares. They go into one channel. Afterwards, I'm going to route the kick, the hi-hat, and the snare into Sen1 and rename that as drums. Now, the beat is a typical 4 on the floor beat with a kick, snare, and hi-hats. For the hi-hat, we'll fill every half a beat, but we lower the velocity of the first, third, fifth, and seventh. This will give us a subtle high end every time the kick drops. Now that we have the basic beat down, let's not forget to drop the tempo to 110 beats per minute. Okay, let's see what we have so far. Now, it doesn't sound perfect because of the snares. The snares are too loud. Now, the snares are loud because there's 3 snares going at once. The reason why we're using 3 snares instead of 1 is so that we can get a more complete sound. However, we are going to need to turn a couple of these down a little. One thing I want to do is to stretch out the first snare, but I want to maintain the pitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the knob for the multiplier, and then I'm going to change it from resample to auto. That way it maintains the same pitch. Now I'm going to turn it down a little in the mixer, and then we're going to play everything together. Now that we have the beat set up, let's get the sample. Now, you can always get the sample and just drag it into the playlist, or you could drag it into Edison. With Edison, you could get the parts that you like and drag that into the playlist. So you could edit it a bit more on Edison. But since I already have all the files ready, I'm just going to drag those into the project. Now, what's next is that we align the beats of the song to the project. Now, if I drag the edges, what that'll do is that it'll cut parts of the song, but if I click on stretch, it'll stretch that part of the song. So with stretch, we're going to try and align the beats. Now we just send the sample to a mixer channel. Give it a name, we give it a color, and now we listen to the whole thing and see what we have so far. We're still not there yet. Okay, now we need to add some compression to the sample because we don't want to hear too much of the original drums. In addition, by adding the compression, we can level the volume output of the sample to match the kick that we added. As you see, the kick from the original sample becomes less and less noticeable the more we compress it. The next thing I do is add a limiter to make sure that the sample does not get any louder than a certain point. Next thing we want to add is a sidechain compression. What this will do to the sample is that it'll do a ducking effect. That way our drums mix well and stand out. As you see, now that I've routed my kick to the compressor, the volume ducks every time the kick comes in. Now let's hear with the rest of the drums. Now, after making a couple of adjustments, the next thing I want to do is to add a limiter to the drums. And by adding a limiter to the drums, it's the same thing with the sample. it's so that it doesn't get louder than a certain point. And what happens here is that whenever the snare comes in, it's always louder than when it's just a kick alone. So what I want to do is I want to level that. Now, before we continue with adding the other samples, what I want to bring out is we have all the samples at auto. What that means is that at any pace that we give it, we can change the tempo whenever we want, and it's always going to re-stretch in order to maintain the same pitch that we want it to have. If it stayed at resampling, then when we speed up the tempo, what that does is that it's going to increase the pitch and so forth. Now, let's add the other samples into the project. Once they're in, we can then re-stretch them to make sure the beats are aligned. Now, for one of the samples that I made, it's not a perfect loop, but through enough modification, we could still make it sound fluid and nice. On top of that, the sidechain compression can drown out a lot of the roughness between the samples. Once they're fixed and added to the mixer, let's see how they sound with the drums. So now that we're done with adding a couple tweaks, we can now loop this over. Afterwards, we throw in our last sample. Here's a note. The last sample cuts in before the sample before even ends. Now we just add in the beats and we do some modifications. Okay, now the basic structure of the song is set up. Now we just throw in the hi-hats. Because we're finally taking into account of the hi-hats, we can now mix them properly. So we need to remove a part where the guy starts singing. Now, it's not a problem because we can just weave him a piece from another loop. Okay, now don't forget to apply those changes to the rest of the song. Afterwards, let's throw in the crash cymbals. Let's just give them a nice color and then we'll mix them into the song. Now, I want to throw in a crowd cheering sound effect because that way it'll sound a little closer to the original song. Okay, so the last thing we need to focus on is filters. We can use parametric EQ2 to get all the filters that we want. Simply make the changes that I'm making and then make an automation clip out of the top blue and purple knob. We're only going to need this from the sample channel and the drum channel. However, I do want to add one more filter, and it's going to be for the snap, and it's just the purple knob. The purple automation clips represent a low pass filter, which plays with the higher end frequencies. The teal automation clips represent a high pass filter, which plays with the lower end frequencies. Now, I can go more into detail about filters in another video, but for now, let's just say I'm using them to add effects into the song. For example, in this part, I'm using the low pass filters to kind of break down the beat while introducing a snap. Because I'm taking away some of the higher end, this means that there's enough room to add a reverb to the snap. At this point, we're wrapping up, so let's just finish those automation clips. One final thing. At the very end of the song, the volume fades out. So just add an automation clip to the master volume and then just let it fade out at the very end. And there you go. You basically have the entire song remade. So, was my video helpful? Was it horrible? Are there certain things that I should go into more detail? Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check out my SoundCloud and Bandcamp. I do have an album in the works, so stick around. I will release the project files and you can find them on the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching.